So compare and contrast. This sometimes is used for merit criteria, but quite commonly is a distinction criteria. So compare and contrast is quite straightforward as it sounds. You are comparing and contrasting two or more items or factors. But the key thing here is detail. Compare and contrast is not just drawing a table and just putting down the differences. It's also not just repeating the past criteria next to each other and allowing the reader to sort of work out the differences for themselves. For compare and contrast, you've got to explain why something is different. So for example, if we go back to my camera analogy, I've explained how it works and why it's needed. If I was to compare and contrast this, I might compare it to other models on the market, other makes. But rather than just telling you that this is £20 cheaper than another camera, I'd need to explain why it's different. So I'm comparing them, but I'm explaining why this is £20 cheaper. Is it something to do with the function of it? Is it something to do with the way it works? So you do need to make sure that you give detail to your similarities and your differences.
Okay, continuing now on to distinction criteria for this particular unit and continuing again with motivation, I'm going to compare and contrast, if this was a presentation, two different videos of two different football managers, Brendan Rodgers being one and Neil Warnock being another. Okay, just starting off with our first video first of all. See Brendan Rodgers with a team talk before the West Brom game last year.
Listen, today's the start.
He's got the team in together, so a very positive environment from the start. Very calm voice as well of his team. No ranting.
The thing to remember before we start this campaign is one thing. You can only trust yourselves.
Setting out key objectives.
Trust the supporters, because they're the best. And you trust your family.
So we're talking about quite an emotive, passionate, very positive type of motivational talk before the start of the match. Okay, this is Neil Warnock giving a half-time team talk. Straight away, when we see him in a minute, if we focus in on his mannerisms, he stepped away from the squad, not gathering them round. He needs time to himself. He goes around the corner and actually starts listening to his players' comments about how they played in the first half. Quite worked up, to say the least. So again, listening to his players. Some bad language being used, a lot of negative talk coming from his team. And Neil getting more and more angry and frustrated about his players' attitudes to the extent that he takes his top off in preparation for what I consider to be a rant. Very direct, swearing every other word, hence why it's bleeped out. This isn't even a form of negative feedback. Unlike Brendan, where it's very positive, this is punishment. Okay, so far I've identified and described the role of a motivator. But if I was going for the big D, the distinction if you like, at that point I really haven't looked at the similarities and differences between Neil and Brendan. Straight away in terms of their body language, Brendan was very approachable, got his team in together, very calm, passive voice, friendly voice to his team in their pre-match team talk, whereas Neil was displaying punishment to his players, degrading them in front of each other, using lots of swear words. In my personal opinion, is quite a Jurassic way of coaching nowadays. The manuals lean more towards negative feedback rather than using punishment. So some quite big differences in the way they talk to their teams. Brendan's body language, hands in front of him, very calm, very positive, not making too many gestures, whereas with Neil, he's storming around in the changing rooms, tops coming off, shouting and pointing at players and swearing at them, etc. In terms of the style, Brendan's trying to get across a point using emotion, pointing towards the fans, family, playing for the club. whereas Neil Warnock is accusing individuals of poor performance out on the pitch. I suppose the real key similarity is that they're both trying to psych up their players, but in different ways. Ready to go out for a better performance from Neil and his team in the second half, and Brendan to kick off the season positively against West Brom.